Good morning and welcome to Business Express. My name is Omatseye Atsenuwa and I've been joined by Rotus Oddiri. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Omas. Good morning to everyone out there. Good to be with y'all all for a Wednesday.
The hump of the week. So let's
Indeed.
let's quickly, because I see your tray is quite filled up, but just to throw this one in before we get into the main agenda for the morning, if maybe you get to check up the Delta State portal in terms of procurement, because the last time you checked, you said it seemed like they've not awarded contracts, but there is one now about 7. So I want to know if that one has been put up there for the overhead bridges and all. We saw 75 billion the other day.
Still no contracts yet.
Okay, and that one, so that's not a contract. But moving on, Rotus, it's a big day for the Tinubu administration because today it will be presenting its first full budget before the National Assembly, and there are issues we need to look at. So, how does this budget compare in terms of other African countries?
Yeah, a lot has been said about the fact that the budget relative to the population is not that big. So the budget was revised upwards by about 1.5 trillion naira. So now it's at 27.5 trillion. If you use the official rates, it closed yesterday on the NAFEX about 887, 883, around there. You get 32.7, 32.8, so about roughly $33 billion budget. So a $33 billion budget for 200 million people. Again, we have to have our official population to get that sorted out. You compare that to a South Africa, and according to data that Business Day put together, South Africa, with a population of about 60 million people, they have a budget of about $132 billion, right? You look at, I think, Algeria, and Algeria with a population of about, what is Algeria's population? Well, 30, they have a budget of about, I think it's 98 billion. No, 44 million people. Yes, 98 billion is their own budget, with the population of 44 million. Who else? Egypt, for 109 million people, a budget of 97 billion. So you compare, and again, Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, those are your three largest economies on the African continent. So, relative to our size, that budget is, and compared to other African nations, it's just not that big.
Okay, so that looks like there's more to be done. But again, we are the ones who say you cut your coat according to the material you've got, looking at what we've got presently. So would we rather go for a bloated budget where we know we can, even what we're looking at right now, we're asking where would we fund it from?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is, the thing is, the fact is that you say it's bloated in terms of, when you look at the expenses, you look at the deficits, which is in double digits in the trillions. The country just needs to do more. You have under your potential. Look, so if for example, the revenue projection has been increased in this revised budget from about 16 trillion to 18 trillion. En masse, Nigeria barely did 7 trillion last year in revenue, so, and you budgeted 16 and then you revised it to 18. Where are you gonna, I mean, potentially, yes, you could get that, but from where? How are you going to do it if you look at historicals? So my issue is just that, just plain facts, just looking at the population, the budget is not large enough to attend to this population in terms of getting us, lifting people out of poverty. So, I mean, it's not budgets that are lifting people out of poverty, it's productivity. There's a book I want to get, How China Escaped the Poverty Trap. Somebody recommended it online. I want to get my hands on it. When you look at the rapid growth of China, it was productivity en masse, and when you say productivity, it means when you go to an office, an agency of government to get something done, and you see civil servants sitting around playing on their phones, and there's so many, or you see LASMA at a roundabout, and there's like 9 of them standing there on their phones, directing traffic, maybe 2 or 3 are working. These kind of things are the kind of productivity and you still have traffic, right? All these types of things are what Nigeria has to sort out. But the sad thing is that if we say we want to cut them down to size, then those people now are out of a job. You've got more unemployed people. So there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work. Everything I've just said, that we could pick on just one item and just stay on that for the rest of this show. So there's work ahead for this administration.
Still talking about work, we'd like to cut out the job for the listener right now to know we like their reaction relating to the budget presentation expected to be at the National Assembly today. Reach out to 0809-444-0981 in terms of a reaction to any of the issues we are talking about today. Let's get on to how much the government expects to spend on pension and debt servicing.
Yeah, so your personnel and pension costs is about 7.7 trillion or so. Your debt service is 8.2 trillion. So together, that's 16 trillion. Together, that is just 2 trillion away from your, and those are costs. Those are costs. So you know, those are already almost as much as your initial projected revenue of 16 trillion, which wasn't even realistic to begin with. So yes. Again, it comes back. If you say you want to cut down the size of government, which some even argue isn't big enough, then what do you do to all those personnel that you're cutting off? Where do they go? You know, they are adding more people to the unemployment line. So sadly, you know, government, unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, is a large employer in this country. So it is about being more productive. If you say you don't want to cut off those people and put them on the unemployment line, you have to be able to become productive enough to where your output is able to cater to a lot more people. And that involves a lot of stuff. That just involves a lot.
So this takes us to how we intend to plug up the costs of this cost and plug our deficit, and also link that up to Kenya, who recently abandoned plan to tap into international capital markets for Eurobond. And are there bumps on the way that Nigeria can avoid as a result of what Kenya has done?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to plug your deficit, you have to borrow more money. I understand they're getting another
100 million
tapping
euros.
The World Bank, African Development Bank, and all these other institutions for funds. It's more boring. Kenya decided to fall back on its Eurobond aspirations, perhaps because rates were too high, and it would cost them a lot of money. So for us, the issue is, I mean, Nigeria hasn't tapped the Eurobond markets in quite a while. As far as the following year, they want to use multilateral agencies with lower interest rates to get these loans. The question is, what are you using the loans for, and how effective are they going to be in improving our productivity? Because if we're not productive, then your population just continues to increase. It's like you're stuffing more people into a kabu or a taxi. The more people you add to it, you're not improving the engine or the size or the capacity of the car to carry these people. You're just going to keep weighing the car down. It's just going to get slower and slower and slower, and you can't get to your destination. To break down, you have to fix one tire, oil. You know, so it's just you're better than I am at these metaphors and analogies, but you can understand that it's just going to be difficult.
So this in itself brings us quietly to the issue of what you call foreign versus domestic debt. What's this discussion about it? What's really it's all about?
So Nigeria's, domestic debt, much of our debt is domestic, right? Which would theoretically say, okay, good. If you are owing more domestically, then I mean, the foreign debt is still, it's still high, right? It's about 100 billion or so. But the argument is that, well, if it's domestic, then it's cheaper. But there have been studies, I think from the World Bank or the IMF, that show that a number of emerging markets countries, your Nigerias, your Algerias, your Egypts, your Kenyans, their domestic debts, because of the interest that they're paying on the debts, can actually be a burden as well. Sometimes, a burden that is still going to prevent the country from growing. So it is not an excuse to say that, okay, because your domestic debt is higher than foreign debt, that you're out of the woods. Debt is still debt. And the currency, the local currency that you are using to pay back that debt is weighed down by lower purchasing power and high inflation. So it's not something to where you can turn and say, okay, well, good, our domestic debt is higher than foreign debt, so we're out of the woods. It's not. It's still an issue. And in some countries, I have to go read that study again. They said the cost of domestic debt is even higher than the foreign debt, And it's not just because you can print money and pay it off that makes it good. By printing money, you're adding to money supply and just increasing inflation. So, Omas, let's walk, There's work.
More work to be done, but
work.
most especially when you look at what the people who are in the aims of affair are budgeting for themselves. So talk to me, what do you think it does to public trust when we see SUVs and other luxurious items budgeted for? What does it do to public trust and confidence?
It erodes it. It erodes public trust. When people hear we're going to borrow more money, they feel that the government is going to borrow more money to fund its lavish lifestyle. You saw what Funsho Doherty exposed with Lagos State. You've seen it now happening. We talked about this with other states and so on. So, it just doesn't do well for public trust. They'll argue that, okay, well, the proportion of that SUV compared to the wider budget is very small, but still, that money that you're, using for these lavish things can go towards more productive ends for the economy.
This leads us to the final lap of the questions for you. Can Nigeria grow its economy to 1 trillion by 2030? And as well, assuming if this is possible to grow to that amount in 6 years, what do you think would need to happen?
I am doubtful, I have to be honest. I do not think we can grow to $1 trillion in 6 years. And all these targets, you're not supposed to just put them out there. You're supposed to do the work and see if you can get there in the first place. If it was possible, then you would have to rapidly. You're talking about growing at, what is it, 10, 12, or is it 15% a year to get there. You can't be doing the 2.5% that we're looking at in the third quarter. You're talking about massive double-digit growth. And in order for you to grow, you have to liberalize sectors. So get those sectors out, like power. Transmission Company of Nigeria needs to be out of government hands and given to a private party with government supervision, so you can ramp up. Power is where it is. If you can ramp up power as quickly as possible and get more people, less power outages, more people starting businesses, then you can possibly get there. So, but in 6 years, I am incredible. Knock on wood, we're going to be here in 6 years, so we'll see. But I doubt it.
Okay, that's a fine place to get to. The messages already waiting, and they seem to know when to get these messages flooded in the timeline when they know it's time to go. So Michael Onyekwere from Marina will leave you saying, Rotus, the real question should be, what is the size of the Nigerian budget relative to the productive population of the country? Of our 200 million plus people, only a small fraction is productive. So yes, the borrowing isn't justified. That's what Michael Onyenweke said. And then I would pick up this next one from Ladi. Ladi says, it's not enough to compare budget figures per population as a basis for justifying an unsustainable budget. The devil is in the details, and we need to compare the allocation to sectors that impact the population. And then it goes on. We should also look at the productivity per population since we are benchmarking. So Michael and Ladi seem to have been reading from the same textbook, and even maybe they may be in different locations this morning. See how their minds work. Fine Oluboroko comes in here. Perhaps if this government block leakages, it will go a long way in improving our revenues. A good example is having a monocameral National Assembly and reduction in lavish lifestyle of our leaders. Finds message. And then I've got this one from Babatunde Alao saying, Rotus, it is interesting here in year to have our budget higher than our projected revenue. I don't understand. It's a failure already. I strongly believe if we are productive and focus on all classes of resources we possess, Nigeria can swing higher than South Africa and Egypt. We borrow to fix roads when we have deposit of bitumen and limestone in Nigeria, yet we don't have the roads. He says, I have lost hope. Babatunde Alao, keep hope alive now. Babatunde Alao. And our final message is from Gilbert usually that's from Festac, yes. There will be an historical perspective to this. Let's watch out for it. Let's go.
Yes.
Gilbert's message on Nigeria not generating enough revenue. Let's ask the big question. Why can't states be creative and industrialize their various spaces? Yeah, let's go. The historical part now. During Gowon's era, Sapele produce rubber. Other regions in the Midwest produce timber for export. What is happening now? Why this crave for monthly allocation from oil revenue? It lives up to expectation, Gilbert Busa, and that's the final message.
Omas, I always look forward to our listeners and their just awesome takes on the economy. It's always great to have the listeners sharing their thoughts, and they're always awesome as usual. I thank the listeners. Omas, I thank you. We'll listen to the president later today when he makes his delivery, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. He'll have a speech to the National Assembly, and we'll hear what he has to say.
And may our losses be less
profitable. Yes, exactly.
And let's be profitable. Have a great day, Rotus. Bye.
Thank you, Omas. Take care.
Yes.